and this highlights the incredible role soil plays not just in agriculture, but also in medicine.
Right. Thanks, Shefali. Welcome back, everyone. We're moving on to our third session of the day in state and regional sustainability. I hope everyone had a great lunch. Feel free to keep moving in and finding a seat. I hope you've had a chance to speak with friends, new and seasoned, and that you've had a chance to enjoy the research posters at the back of this room, as well as the transportation activity. If you're joining us right now, welcome to the State and Regional Sustainability session. Now over to our session moderator and the Director of Parking and Transportation, J.D. Weidman.
Thank you, Jessica and Shefali. Well, for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is J.D. Weidman. I'm the Director of Transportation Services here at SDSU, and I'm going on about 2 years here, and it's been the privilege of my career to work with you all. So I'm really excited to have our panel here today, and we'll have them come up and join us at this table here. And I'll start with introductions. I think you're all used to this by now, but for the question and answer portion, we have the QR code on the screen. So definitely scan that and enter your questions for this panel, and I'll introduce them, but we'll go through questions at the end. We'll save plenty of time for that. Like I said, my name is J.D. Weidman. I'll be your moderator today. And our first panelist is LaDonna DiCamillo from the California High-Speed Rail Authority. We're really excited to have the California High-Speed Rail Authority here. They have a table in the back if you want to learn more. We also have Tait Galloway from the City of San Diego, City Planning Department. He's the Deputy Director of Community Planning and Housing Policy and also a double SDSU alum. And then our third panelist is Jennifer Williamson from the San Diego Association of Governments, also known as SANDAG. You'll hear us say SANDAG over and over again for short. And Jennifer is the Deputy Director of Mobility Planning and also a double SDSU alum. All right, I'm gonna take a seat with our panelists. Madeline, can I use one of the microphones up here? Yes. Test. Can you all hear me?
Mine is on.
If not, JD,
Test. Okay. All right, I will turn it over to LaDonna to briefly talk about the High-Speed Rail Authority and what they have going on.
Thanks, JD. I'm going to start with just an overview of our program because a lot of people haven't heard from us for a while, if ever. So I want to give you the highlights of our overall program and vision. We were really kicked off by the voters in 2008 with Proposition 1A to connect San Francisco with Los Angeles, Anaheim. Our phase 1 is 494 miles, which is shown here on the map in blue. We do have some phase 2 identified that would take us up to Sacramento and also into San Diego. But right now our focus is on completing phase 1 and specifically in the Central Valley where construction is underway. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But with Prop 1A, they wanted to keep us competitive. So our trip time between San Francisco and Union Station is to be under 3 hours. Our target is 2 hours and 40 minutes. We will be at speeds over 200 miles an hour, which is really exciting. Where we are at speeds over 200 miles an hour, we'll have dedicated corridors for those. We have a commitment to zero emissions. So from a sustainability standpoint, we are focused on finding renewable sources of energy, electricity, for maintaining our electrified service that gets us to that 200 miles per hour. And then also as part of Prop 1A, they gave us some goals and objectives to make us competitive. They limited the number of stations or stops that we would have. And they also have an aggressive program where we are working with communities on building stations. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that next slide. So where we are today, We're under construction on 119 miles in the Central Valley. That construction starts just north of Bakersfield and runs to Merced. We are doing advanced design on a full 171 between Bakersfield and, you can see it in yellow is under construction, the blue is where we're trying to complete the full segment from Bakersfield to Merced. The 119 miles will be a test track. We've actually, you'll hear that we haven't laid track. That is true, but that is the last thing that you do. So we're building a lot of the infrastructure, the culverts, the bridges. We're getting all that in place, and then we'll come through and put all of the track down and the electrical systems so that we can get a test track going. And we're planning on that in about 2030 to 2033. We'll have that 119 miles as a test track running. But trying to finish and really focus on the 171 so that we can show Californians that this will work. We have environmentally cleared. I don't know how many of you are involved in environmental processes. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing. But we're environmentally cleared, so that means we're ready to start construction or able to start construction on most of our project, phase 1, 463 miles. Still working on the Los Angeles to Anaheim section, which is a complicated section, but for the most part, we've gotten our phase 1 environmentally cleared. And then we have a whole team that is working with the stations in the Central Valley on planning, making sure that the cities are thinking ahead so that we can build transit-oriented development and have more than just a platform at these cities in the long run, because we really want to keep our ridership high and be able to work within the communities where we'll have stops. So we have a team that works with these different cities, Merced, Fresno, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield, on station planning, station area planning, to make sure that we're more than just a platform there. Last slide is really just where we're looking toward. One more slide. What's ahead of us in the near term? I mean, obviously we're trying to get the full phase 1 completed. But for our near term, we're really working on just that 119 miles and putting tracking systems in place. So we started a railhead actually just north of Bakersfield, where we'll bring in track and other supplies so that we can begin laying that track and doing that civil work. We want to finish that full 171. We hope to award a contract for the overhead catenary system later this year, so that's on our near-term agenda. And then we'll be completing the station design and starting to build some of our stations in the Central Valley this year, either later or early next year. And then we're working really closely with our partners at Brightline. So High-Speed Rail is a state agency. Brightline West is a private sector high-speed rail provider who's proposing to connect Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California with Las Vegas. We're really excited about the potential that we see in connecting our line from via Palmdale. So we would go from Bakersfield to Palmdale, catch the High Desert Corridor, which is the Joint Powers Authority that would connect over to Victor Valley, where Brightline West would be operating. So we're working on that Southwest Corridor connection. I think it's the first connection that we'll be able to see where we can connect, actually, eventually San Francisco with Las Vegas. For the rider, it will be a one-seat ride. You don't care who operates it, but we'll be able to make that connection, and we're really excited about that partnership, and we're kind of focused on how to make that interoperable. We call it interoperable, and make sure that we're all coordinating so that we can make that happen for Californians.
Thanks, LaDonna. So it's so interesting to think on the long time horizon that transportation projects take to get built. And I think the high-speed rail project is probably on one of the longest time horizons. But I wanted to have a panel here to speak to the state level and that very long time horizon all the way down to a local level. So next up, I'm going to turn it over to Tait to speak on that local level a little bit more and some of their areas of focus at the city's Department of Planning.
All right, great. I don't know, can you hear me? Great. I'm very happy to be here, and I just wanted to first start off and I'll give an overview of what the planning department does. And really, we're somewhat unique in the sense that we somewhat operate both on a local level and a regional level, given the size of the city, where the city of San Diego is the second largest city in California with 1.4 million and the 8th overall largest city within the United States. And in many ways, we're a collection of many different little, what would be cities, and most other parts of the state are individual communities. Because of that, we do things a little bit more focused and at different levels than what you would typically see in a city planning department. While we still have other department that works on permitting and traditionally what city planning is known to do, but we do focus on creating opportunities for homes and jobs, advancing mobility infrastructure, as well as championing sustainability and emphasizing streets design for people through our different policy documents. Next slide. So as part of that, how do we address all these different focused areas in terms of the planning that we do? As I said, we primarily are focused on updating our various land use plans and regulations to provide policy guidance and requirements for our individual communities as well as our overall city. As part of that, we do have a comprehensive plan, which is known as a general plan that's required for all cities and counties in the state. It provides what I'd say is so-called blueprint for land use, mobility, sustainability policies, just to name a few. Community plans are somewhat unique. I think San Diego and Los Angeles are pretty much the only two jurisdictions I know of in the state that does provide community plans, which serve as a component of a general plan, provide more specific policy guidance on a community level and address the unique community issues that can vary between different parts of the city and different communities. Also related to that, the implementation of those land use policies, we focus on providing guidance in our development regulations to implement both the citywide and community plans. And more recently, to be in line with state requirements, the city's adopted a very aggressive climate action plan, which provides citywide goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And through that, our overall reduction in vehicle miles traveled, which our community plans do play a large part of that. The department currently is just, for instance, one of the activities that we're working on is in the process of updating our street design manual to provide guidance for retrofitting many of our existing streets so that they provide for not just automobiles, but for all modes of transportation. Next slide. So why do we update our community plans? We do this to help focus on meeting the city's overall climate goals by creating more opportunities, as I said, for jobs and homes, especially near transit, and for identifying infrastructure improvements for transit, bicycling, walking, consistent with our citywide policies in the general plan, and which provides our overall land use and mobility strategy for future growth in the city. Next slide. Currently, the City Planning Department, we're in the process of updating a few community plans as part of our overall program. So you can see on this map, it shows the areas in green, which we have completed, as well as the areas in orange, which we're currently in the process of working on. And so that includes our Claremont community, our mid-city communities, the college area, which we're in right now, and we plan to be starting Rancho Bernardo and Otay Mesa Nestor in the near future. The update plans provide updated policies and land use guidance, again, to provide opportunities for how we take advantage of, for instance, the trolley within the college area, as well as future bus rapid and existing transit investments in our communities, which we're going to talk about in our next speaker in terms of what SANDAG works on. Finally, next slide. Just to give you just a brief overview just of what we're doing right now with the college area community plan. We're identifying areas in this map you can see in the purple along the various corridors such as El Cajon Boulevard, Montezuma, college area, to find locations or improve opportunities for more jobs, more housing. A big part of that strategy in terms of working with the community over the last couple of years is to really strengthen the connections from the San Diego State campus to the adjacent neighborhoods to create a real destination. And we can start seeing this already just in the over 25 years since I left the university in terms of what College Avenue and Montezuma are starting to transform into a livable mixed-use area, but certainly a lot of work more to do and a great opportunity in partnership with the university to do that. As part of that is also creating opportunities for people to walk, to ride their bikes on these corridors. So in terms of how can we reimagine these streets and make them for transit-friendly, for bicycle-friendly, and for pedestrians. So part of that is through new development and looking at opportunities for widening sidewalks, creating opportunities for plazas, paseos, opportunities for recreational space, linear corridors that can provide great places for people to walk, ride their bike, and exercise on, as well as creating opportunities such as transit priority measures and bus-only lanes along these major corridors as well, so we can improve our access. And then, of course, with the increasing frequency of the trolley and the great opportunity that provides for this station and this campus as well as near the hospital. We anticipate going to City Council by the end of this year for that plan, and we've released a first draft a few months ago, and we're planning on going to be releasing a second draft, and certainly encourage everybody to go to our website and review it and provide any comments that you have. We greatly appreciate all the input we get. Thanks. That concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Tait. So Tait mentioned the climate action plan that the city has, and the city has a bunch of great advisory boards. I'm privileged to be able to sit on the climate advisory board, and there's multiple other boards that usually have open seats. So I believe there's a tree advisory board, a mobility board, and a resiliency board. So if you have any interest in those areas, definitely check out the city's boards and commissions website, and I'm happy to help you navigate that too if you're interested in applying for one of those seats. But I think this kind of brings it down to the local level, especially right in the college area where we're updating our college area plan for the first time, actually since the year I was born, 1989. So it's a really exciting update, and it really does govern a lot of the things that happen in the college area. So definitely check out that document on the city's website, and if nothing else, at least read the 7 big visions that are in that plan. We're going to move on to Jennifer from SANDAG to talk a little bit about what they're up to.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Williamson. I'm the Deputy Director of Mobility Planning at SANDAG. And before I get started, how about a show of hands for how many of you actually know who SANDAG is? Wow, impressive. I bet you guys didn't know everything that we do, though, and I'll walk you through that. So just to let you know here, the region that you're seeing on this map is everything that SANDAG oversees. So basically from the county line up in Oceanside, all the way out past Escondido into the rural areas, down to the border, SANDAG has a responsibility to plan, design, and build projects. We have 18 cities in the region that serve on our board of directors, and we also have the County of San Diego. We also include tribes in that, the Port of San Diego, the airport, the transit operators. All of those come together in our board of directors. So if you ever come to a SANDAG board meeting, you'll see a huge number of people that are involved in making decisions for the region. And why is SANDAG important? I mean, a lot of people, it's really exciting to see you all know who SANDAG is. The reason we're important is because we ask local jurisdictions, like the city of San Diego, to come together in a group and make regional decisions. So if you have, let's think about this, you have Oceanside making decisions for Oceanside, you have the City of San Diego making decisions for City of San Diego, you have Chula Vista making decisions for Chula Vista. But that doesn't account for all of the regional infrastructure that passes through all those different areas. So if you think about the freeways, the I-5 that travels up and down the entire length of San Diego County. If you think about the trolley, you know, we pass through multiple different cities. Every time we design and build something, we're passing through multiple jurisdictions. So we ask our local partners to come together, take off their local hats, and put on the regional hats and make decisions for the San Diego region. And it's a tough thing, let me tell you. Nothing easy about regional decision-making. So next slide, please. So SANDAG has a lot of roles, and this is the thing that people don't really understand. So at the federal level, we are the MPO, with the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And what that means is that we develop a regional plan, and we're actively engaged in our 2025 regional plan right now. And the region we do a regional plan, which is the blueprint for transportation infrastructure within the region. We develop all the projects that take us out to 2035 in the near term, 2050 in the long term. And then we establish the local streets and roads, major arterial projects as part of that plan too. It's basically the blueprint for how we're going to develop our transportation infrastructure. It's also a requirement for federal funding. So it's a good plan, but it's a really important plan if you want to get any money. The second thing that we do is we are the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Again, this is a requirement to have done as part of the regional plan. And essentially, the state governs our responsibility in the regional plan to establish some reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a 19% per capita reduction in GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, throughout the region. Essentially what that means is that we have to develop a transportation network and land use to really reduce how this region is emitting greenhouse gases. We also have a requirement to reduce vehicles miles traveled, essentially how much you travel around the region. And a lot of people think that, zero emission vehicles is a path to do that. You can have a whole host of zero emission vehicles out there, but if they're all traveling around together and getting caught in congestion, then you're really not doing much to reduce the impacts on the overall region. The next thing that we are is the Council of Governments, and this is a more localized responsibility. We do what's called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and this is another really hard thing that SANDAG does. Essentially, we have to develop a criteria for how much low-income housing each of these jurisdictions is required to build. And that's, if I told you that it was hard to put on your regional hat, it's even harder to put on your housing hat, because there's a lot of different agencies within this region, or jurisdictions within the region, that have trouble meeting that housing requirement. And if you think about little cities, if they have a big low-income housing requirement, it's a big lift for them to try to figure out how to build it. If they don't build it, it goes back again to funding, and it's a big deal. We're also the consolidated agency, and what that means is that we have a very unique role in California. There's not a lot of metropolitan planning organizations like SANDAG, where we plan, design, and build projects. So most MPOs, if you go up to LA, all they do is plan. And it's kind of cool. I mean, you get to go up there and you get to create all these great plans, and then you hand them off to somebody else to design and build them. At SANDAG, we don't have that luxury. We plan these projects and we have to turn them over to our engineers to design them, and then ultimately we turn them over to a different group of engineers to build them. And that means that we hold a lot of responsibility for really delivering on our projects. And it's a big role within the region to make sure that we do that. Finally, SANDAG is what we call a locally supported agency. So we have Transnet, which is our local sales tax. It's a really important tax that you all voted for, or maybe some of you might have been too young to vote for. That makes me feel really old. But it's a sales tax that we all voted for to help support our transportation. And that funds things like the trolley. The trolley outside that you see has a huge component of Transnet that was used to fund that project. It funds local streets and roads. It funds buses, rapid buses. So the sales tax component is a really big deal. And as the regional transportation, the RTC for the San Diego region, we actually oversee the requirement of that. And we have an agency called the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee at SANDAG that helps us to make sure that we're doing it right. So with all that being said, why is this important to you guys? Because, everything that we want to do to encourage and build transportation, you have a role in. You have a role as regional participants, as taxpayers, as, maybe future employees of planners within the region, to come together and kind of put your regional hats on to help us figure out how we get people from one area to another in this region. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to JD so he can ask us some questions, I think.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. And fun fact, my partner's dad retired from SANDAG as a transportation planner, so that's always fun. Lots of people remember Mike Hicks, and he came and spoke at SDSU a lot, so that's always a fun connection back to SANDAG and the important work that they do. So we have some questions for our panelists. They're up on the screen too, so you can keep track. I know transportation can get pretty in the weeds, but this one should be pretty easy. I'm gonna ask each one of our panelists to tell us how they got into the planning and transportation profession, especially since we have so many students in the room that are likely either looking for jobs or will be looking for jobs soon.
I took a non-traditional path. For me, I'm regional director for the High-Speed Rail Authority, which means I kind of fill in whatever is needed to keep things moving. So I'm kind of a leader of multiple teams. But my background, I have a degree in chemistry, minored in physics, thought for a second I would teach, and that didn't happen. I went to work for a freight railroad, did a lot of environmental work for them, and moved into community work, doing community liaison type work because I could speak different languages, sort of. I could talk about what our attorneys wanted, what the environmental team wanted. I could speak railroad, which is a whole other kind of thought process when you think about how to plan a railroad. Technically, I'm retired from that and went to work for High-Speed Rail because I just believe in the project and hope that we can get it done for California. So I took a non-traditional path. As I said earlier, I do a lot of environmental work because I'm an attorney. It really kind of fits in with helping figure out how to advance environmental documents in a, you try to find a balance between making everybody happy and getting your client's work done. and so there's this tug of war that I've found kind of a niche in doing, but very non-traditional path to get there.
I'll tell you that I never thought I was going to be in transportation. I'll tell you that. So I started out my career and I was going to be a city manager. I thought public administration was the way I wanted to go. I majored in public administration at SDSU undergrad, and I minored in transportation engineering, which was a very strange thing. But I had a professor who came to me and said, you're really good at this math stuff, so you should maybe think about doing something that not a lot of women go into. And at the time I thought, oh geez, oh God, I don't know about this. But he was a great professor, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I said, what the heck, why not? So I went ahead and got a minor in transportation engineering, and then when I graduated in '91, the economy just sucked. It just was awful. And there weren't a lot of jobs out there, and so I said, what am I gonna do with myself? And I decided I was gonna go to graduate school. And that wasn't my path either, because I really didn't want to go to more school. I thought, oh my God, it took me 5 years to get out of SDSU undergrad. And I thought, okay, there's no way I'm going to graduate school. What do you think? I went to graduate school, right out of undergrad. And graduate school was awesome. It was so much more enlightening than undergrad. Not to say that undergrad isn't great, don't get me wrong, but it was much more focused. And during that time, I started to really get into some planning classes, and I decided, you know what, this planning stuff's a whole lot more interesting than being a public administrator and doing budgets and all that other stuff. So I ended up with a master's degree in urban and regional planning, and then throughout my career, or my educational career, I did a bunch of internships. I must have done like, I don't know, 6, 7 internships in the 7 years I was getting my education, and I did everything. I worked at the city architect's office. I worked at the city's art and culture office. I worked at the city planning office. I worked for CCDC. I worked for, I can't even remember where I worked for, but you know, I did these internships over this time, and it really helped me not only to figure out kind of where I wanted to focus, but it also really helped me when I did get out of graduate school to get a job, because now I had real world experience. And so I got out of graduate school and I went to work, if you can believe this, at the American Red Cross. It's like, what? You went and got a regional planning degree and you're working at the Red Cross? They did specialized transportation services for senior and disabled people. And it paid less than if I had gone to work at 7-Eleven. But boy, was it a great step into a career in transportation. From there, I went to MTS, and from MTS, I went to SANDAG. And I've been at SANDAG for 30 years now. Makes me feel really old. But SANDAG is a great place. There's a lot of noise and chatter sometimes around SANDAG. It's all just noise and chatter. We do great projects. We get to do a lot of really interesting and valuable projects for the region. And so that's where I've been. I started at the very bottom at SANDAG, and now I'm 2 steps from the top. So there you go.
So I'm embarrassed to say how long ago it was, but it's almost well over 30 years, well, almost quite over 30 years. I came to San Diego. I had grown up in San Francisco in the city, so I was used to a very big city, urban environment, and coming to the college area and coming to San Diego State as a freshman well before the days of the internet, so I had no idea what I was going to get myself into. I just had this idea that San Diego State must be near the beach, and I'd get to surf, and it would be great. Of course, you know, what you think of when you're 18. I just wanted to get out and do something different. And coming here, it was quite a shock. I might as well have been in the middle of the desert. I thought I could just take the bus, I could walk, I could get around. I tried walking down Montezuma to the end of Fairmount, and I think people were honking at me, telling me, what the heck am I doing out in the road? Big learning experience for me, and really just started kind of more of a path of really a fascination and an interest in everything about cities, the urban environment, and in transportation, and really, I think, from a passion of how can we improve our communities, our environment, to make it a better place. And so I actually had a great opportunity, and that kind of led me into taking geography, and really got in and ended up getting a degree in geography and then emphasis in urban and regional analysis. But I had a professor in one of my urban geography classes that had been a former city planner, and really got an opportunity to understand, you know, what a city planner does, and had an opportunity, was debating. You know, I had a professor who was really encouraged me to get my master's degree in geography, and I just, you know, as much as I love geography, and I still love geography, I just really wanted to be more focused in not just analyzing, because a lot of in geography is really just looking at, you know, where and why and how people are using space and what they're doing, much more than just making maps, which I also do. But really the decision making, so much as such as what Jennifer was talking about in terms of being on the policy side and the city manager, the 2 schools in terms of our public administration and city planning are much really more focused on the decision-making process and land use, and in transportation, and how we make decisions, why we make decisions, and really how those all are interrelated and work together. And so that became something I was more interested in, and at the time I also happened to get, interesting fact, I didn't know you were an intern at, or worked at CCDC. I did as well. My senior year at San Diego State, and at the time it was, as Jennifer mentioned, it was, I think we were just in the tail end of the recession, and very difficult to get jobs. So I just decided, I didn't want to end up just working as a junior planner and somewhere in the sticks. So I decided I would go back and get my master's degree, and ended up working, got an internship at SANDAG, and then for my final year in the master's program, worked at the city planning department for the city of San Diego. And so I never really expected that I was going to stay as long as I have. I've been now with the city for 25 years, but started off as an intern and now worked my way up to deputy director. So it's been a fun and exciting opportunity. And usually as a city planner, if you get a chance to work on updating a general plan, which I did when I first started working at the city, but not only once but twice. We just recently updated it last year as well. So I've been having a great opportunity, to be able to work on large policy documents, to work on multiple plans, and really lay the framework for future land use decisions that you'll see. And one thing about city planning, and perhaps a little bit different than working on capital projects or transportation projects, is a lot of what we do is we have to rely upon what happens in the development world. And so plans take a lot of years, and sometimes they may not fully implement the way you expect it. So it's certainly a long game, and one you have to be patient, and oftentimes leads to incremental change. But when you do see change happening, it is really exciting to see, and constantly moving towards a better environment, a more sustainable environment, a more climate-friendly environment. So, thanks.
So there's a lot of wisdom at this table is what I'm hearing. And it's so cool. I was having lunch with a few students, and they were talking about the job market and how hard it is right now, and that is absolutely true. But it's amazing to see two double SDSU alumni at this table who are movers and shakers in our region. So if you're a student looking for a job now, don't lose hope. Go work for the Red Cross if you need to. Take an untraditional path. But thanks for sharing your experiences. All right, so to Jennifer, what are some of SANDAG's top priority projects that are going to shape the mobility future in our region?
So we have a lot going on at SANDAG, and it's pretty exciting right now. I mean, the funding environment is changing, so it's getting a little harder to implement these projects. But our top priority right now is our low sand corridor. That's the rail corridor coming down from Oceanside. It actually goes all the way up to San Luis Obispo and comes down to Old Town. Santa Fe Depot, excuse me. And we are putting a lot of time and effort into double tracking the coaster and trolley service so we can get higher frequencies on those. That's the major corridor connecting San Diego to LA. We're also doing a lot of work. You've probably heard of our Del Mar Bluffs, the collapse out there. So that is a huge, huge priority for our region. And we're very fortunate to get a state grant to do some improvements on the bluffs. It was a $350 million grant. Seems like an enormous, astronomical sum of money, but that'll get us through the environmental process. So we'll then be looking for money to take us through to construction. Our other big project is connecting to Mexico via Otay Mesa East. It will be our third border crossing, and it's an essential crossing for goods movement. Right now, goods come through Otay Mesa, and there's pretty much a big slog of vehicles that come up to connect us with Mexico and all of the manufacturing that happens in Mexico. And so opening up this new border crossing that'll be almost specifically for trucks coming in with goods and materials into the U.S. will kind of open up capacity at Otay Mesa for more pedestrian and car crossings to free up what's happening at San Ysidro. So it's kind of a cascade, if you will, of improvements that will happen once Otay Mesa is updated. And then our next one is kind of a finer grain number of projects. We have 6 rapid projects in the region that we're working actively on. We're in planning and development on them to facilitate more, or speedier, if you will, more and speedier transportation. Rapid projects are meant to be faster than your local bus service that are out there. We have some rapids in the region right now. I would say those are our first generation of rapids, and they do a good job, but they don't do a great job. So we've learned a lot from those, and now we're going to look to do a great job on the next round of rapids. And then finally, I'll tell you that another big priority we have is to improve the Blue Line Trolley. The Blue Line Trolley is the workhorse of the region, and it carries, I think I just saw something in the realm of like 70,000 people every day up through the region. So if you can even imagine if we had to put all those people in cars and get them on the road, that's what the Blue Line does for us. And so we want to look at, can we speed it up? Right now, if you want to go from the border to downtown San Diego in a car, it'd take you maybe 20 minutes, maybe. If you did that same thing on the Blue Line Trolley, it would take you almost 50 minutes to get from the border to Santa Fe Depot. And that's just unacceptable. That's why people don't use transit, because it can be slow and laborious for people. So we're trying to figure out how to get it up to 30 minutes. And that's a really big project that we're working on. So those are some of the biggies for us.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Jennifer. And I've been lucky enough to work with SANDAG on the Rapid 625 bus, which will hopefully connect SDSU down to the Chula Vista National City area on a one-seat rapid bus ride. So that's just one of the many projects SANDAG's working on that will impact SDSU.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, JD, if I could have a minute, just to talk about that route. So I would encourage you to really get involved in this route. We have done some public meetings. We have some more coming up here. And this route is going to be a terrific benefit to the region. We have done conceptual planning. We're working very closely to figure out, how this thing is going to operate. Is it El Cajon Boulevard? Is it University? Where are we going to get our priority? We want this to be a highly prioritized route, which means, working with the city on dedicated lanes if it's warranted, working with a lot of technology to get the bus to pass through signals very quickly. We really, really, really will be looking for SDSU's, the community of SDSU college area, to come out in force when we have our next public meeting to tell us what you want. Like, where do you guys want to connect to? This is generally where we're going, but where along this route do you all live, work, play, and need to get to? So just a heads up on that.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, and we'll try to even host a meeting here maybe at SDSU. For some engagement around that. It's really important to show up to those public meetings and speak up if you do want those projects to move forward. Don't assume someone else is going to go speak on behalf of that project, because projects don't just happen. Our elected leaders listen to the citizens, so go speak up for those projects when you hear about them. All right, I'm going to ask LaDonna this question first, but I'm sure Jennifer and Tait can join in. So a lot of rail infrastructure takes 25 to 30 years to deliver on. Thinking in terms of the Purple Line, we know that will probably take 30 or more years. But actually, if you could back out and talk about the state rail plan and what that is and why it's important for the state, and then talk about how some of these projects can come to fruition from a funding perspective.
It's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it really is important, though, to have a plan, to know where we're going, to make sure it's integrated. The folks that put together the state rail plan, it gives us an idea of where there are priorities, what lines make the most sense, so that when dollars are available, we have that blueprint and can start checking off where to send our funds. Now, I will say, I worked 30 years on the private sector, and the public sector is dog eat dog for funds. It's pretty much everybody's looking for funds for their priority projects. So I think that's really why the state rail plan is important, to kind of help balance and make sure that all the regions across the state are looked at. We look at population, who's, ridership, where we're going to get the most for our money. And then there's always a balancing act. And on the high-speed rail side, I mean, when Proposition 1A was promulgated, the estimate was the money that was allocated was about 20% of the cost estimate at that time. One of the things that we're running into is for a mega project like that, it really needed a dedicated funding source, something that we could plan to. So even if it's a 50-year plan, if we had a dedicated funding source, you would know how to set the priorities, where the funds are coming from. The struggle that we've really had is that we had that 20%, so it was $10 billion set aside from the state bond. But then we were looking for grants, and so you're constantly trying to figure your plan of what you want to do into what grants are coming available and when, and can I fit this project into that hole? And well, that's not really where I'd spend my dollars if I had my druthers, but since those are the funds that are available, those are the funds you go for. And it for us on a mega project like what we're trying to do, it's really turned out to be pretty challenging. So we are advocating right now for a longer plan. We're part of Cap and Trade, which does give us some funds, but really to have a long-term dedicated funding source that we could plan to would help us on the delivery side. And then we have to be ready. We have to have our plan in place. We have to be ready. We have to have our environmental documents done and all of that as well. But that's where the state rail plan comes into play, is that it can help set those priorities and make sure that everybody who has a part in rail, like we're the arterial, but then as you get to the feeder, the last mile, it really is an opportunity to look at how it all fits together. So yeah, funds, dollars, money.
Add to that, Jennifer.
Yeah, we also do a lot of rail planning, not high-speed rail planning, but a lot of rail planning. And, these projects, you have to take them in pieces, just like LaDonna said. A lot of what we do is figure out what projects have independent utility within a major project. So for instance, we have a project called the Purple Line that JD mentioned, and the Purple Line is kind of the next big rail line that we're looking at planning from San Ysidro all the way up to Sorrento Valley. So if you can imagine, that's over 30 miles, and you would never build a 30-mile project. So what we do is, and what we've done here just recently, is you start to figure out what is the first piece of that project, what makes the most sense and could operate as its own as you continue to build on that piece of the project. So we spend a lot of time doing what we call alternatives analysis, and then we do, our environmental document. But all the time as we're figuring out how to phase these projects, we're looking for funding. The funding is always a chase, and we look for grants. SANDAG's been incredibly successful with grants. And the reason for that is we have a border crossing, which generates a huge amount of travel within the region. We also a military town. We're also a high-tech town. So there's quite a bit that San Diego has going for us in terms of funding, but the funding kind of is drying up a little bit. It's getting harder and harder to find these grants. So we also rely on sales tax measures. And, tax is often a bad word for a lot of people. But that is what we get our matching funds for. So if you get a grant, you might get, I don't know, let's just be generous and say you get 50% of a piece of a project cost to build that project. The other 50% is usually locally generated. So it has to come from a matching source. And you can't match federal money with federal money. You often have to match federal or state money with local money. So it's a big game we play. Honestly, I say it's a game, but it is the most critical thing we do. So I shouldn't be so dismissive on the game, but it sometimes feels like checkers and you're constantly moving things around. You also have to build a coalition. You have to build a public support for the project. Once you lose the public and they think that you are just not doing the right thing, it's very hard to continue getting projects done. You have to build a lot of critical data to support the projects, and then you have to have a really good coalition of local governmental support. So the politics are often at play. We send people constantly to Washington DC to advocate for our projects. And it's just a constant grind. It's one piece at a time.
Great perspective. And I know we have a lot of questions from the audience, so I'm actually going to skip ahead and ask this question about land use. I think I heard a little bit of mention around transit-oriented development with the high-speed rail project. But if each of you could briefly speak to the importance of not just transportation planning, but also the land use and the zoning and all the other parts and pieces that go into that to make projects successful in the long term.
So I think, it's a little bit of chicken and egg. You have to have the land use in place, often in terms of being competitive in terms of getting a lot of these state and federal grants and funding sources to build the transportation to support it. And that often comes with the challenge of, from the community's perspective, about what we hear is, this is great, but we need the infrastructure and we need it now. Well, sometimes you need to have the land use in place and you need to actually start seeing the change happen to help actually support, whether it's looking at dedicated right-of-way for bus rapid transit or rail. It's important that we start making future decisions, and often cases, in many places in the state, we're not dealing with just vacant, green, undeveloped land. We're dealing in urban areas and built-up areas that have an existing land use pattern, and really trying to reinvent that and refocus that and reimagine that into a sustainable area, into one in which you can actually walk to transit or ride your bike to it. So it's all very important together in terms of just thinking over that 30, 40-year horizon and making sure that the transportation is matching your land use and zoning plans.
Yeah, I mentioned it as part of our station planning efforts, and to us it's critical. If you go back and look at Proposition 1A in 2008, the group that put it together was really trying to be visionary and look ahead and put in one of the requirements, and there are many, and some of them I could argue that in hindsight we should probably tweak, but one of the requirements is that we are that we're revenue neutral once we start operating. So land use becomes extremely important to what we're doing in the station planning, because we need to have riders. For us to be revenue neutral, obviously we're going to need to work very closely with the communities where we're planning these stations. We want to make sure our stations are in the right place, so that we have a ridership potential for those stations. So it is very critical. The other thing that I kind of find funny, that I know that if you're planners you'll understand this, is it's not just about transit-oriented development when you're planning. I mean, sometimes it's about water, drainage, where the water goes. I mean, it really is important to think through some of those things so that you don't end up building something that constantly floods, that's constantly a problem. So we work really closely with the communities to make sure that we're thinking through all of those kind of factors, making sure that we're transit friendly so the buses can drop off near the station and have a good flow there. A lot goes into it. It's not my area of expertise, but I find it really fascinating to think through some of those things, and it's really important to what we're working on.
I'll just add, I think it all begins with land use. At SANDAG, we use those 18 cities and the county that I talked about first thing in my presentation. We use all their most up-to-date land use plans to inform the regional plan. And what that does is when we go to develop these projects, we use those land use plans to figure out where the density is, to figure out where people are living. We look at where the employment centers are. We have many tiers of employment centers. We look at where the military is. We look at, how are the tribes getting around? Where's the densest part of the tribal lands? We use all of that data that's developed really from these land use plans, and then a lot of other data sources to really figure out where these projects can go. Land use also helps us define how a project is going to be constructed. A lot of these rail projects now, you can't just put them through the middle of a community because the community's built out. but you need the rail projects to go straight so they go fast and they get to where you want them to go. So land use plans also help us determine in geography and all the good things you guys are learning about how you're going to build this thing. Is it going to be grade separated? Is it going to be at a subway? Is it going to be on a bridge? You know, if you look at the Mid-Coast line that goes up to UCSD, the trolley line, you'll see it's almost entirely on structure. That's because the way that the land use has been built out and how we can get to those densest areas. So in my mind, land use is like one of the most critical things that we work with in developing our plans and projects.
Awesome. Well, I could ask this crew questions all day, but I know a lot of you have submitted questions. So I'm going to put the QR code back up if you have any other questions you want to submit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Madeline to ask some questions.
Thank you, JD. Okay. We have a very engaged audience, everyone, so lots of questions. So I'm just going to run through them. Let's see. First one is for high-speed rail. Is the high-speed rail representing a government entity or a private corporation with countries in Asia and Europe? Why is their process so streamlined compared to our timelines and setbacks?
I work for the state organization, so high-speed rail is part of California's Transportation Authority. We're part of that. There are, Brightline West is a private sector high-speed rail provider. That's the Vegas to Rancho line that I mentioned. I will say there are differences. We, because of our Prop 1A requirements, are at speeds of 200 miles per hour, which triggers safety requirements that aren't the same. If you're private, you can balance some of those decisions. Maybe you don't want to go over 180 because it triggers certain safety requirements. So that's part of what I was saying. You know, we were locked into a vision, which was a good vision, but maybe there's some opportunity to get it done faster if you don't trigger all those requirements. Anyway, we are public. There are private. As to other countries, I think, I mean, you can have the whole debate about California Environmental Quality Act and what it's done to some projects. One group argues that it's made the projects better. Another argues that it makes them all more costly and can get bogged down, and opponents can use it and abuse the rules. Because I think in part I've done this for so long and I'm an attorney, I try to be reasonable, and I generally have everybody a little bit mad at me. And I figure that's probably, I'm doing the right thing, because in the end they'll go, oh yeah, I didn't get exactly what I want, but it's still better than nothing. So it is really, particularly when you're a public agency, it's a struggle to walk that balance. And other countries don't have those same requirements for CEQA and environmental process.
Next question is for the city planner, Tait. Let's see. What sustainable dense housing plans are being considered in a way that remains environmental for natural habitats and ecologically at-risk areas?
Good question. So most of all the areas that we're focusing on, in fact, I'd say pretty much all the areas that we're focusing on for development and growth in the city is within existing urban areas, and really focusing, for instance, here in the college area, and how we could take advantage of the planning and work that SANDAG has done, for instance, with the trolley stations that are here on campus and the one that's near the hospital, as well as the existing bus rapid route that runs down El Cajon Boulevard, as well as what Jennifer talked about with future lines that would go down Montezuma and additional on further down on El Cajon Boulevard as well. And where we can, within the existing area, within existing infrastructure, utilize those areas to improve the quality of life within the community. And by doing so, that hopefully takes off pressure off of the backcountry areas. So most of San Diego, in terms of open space areas within the city of San Diego, is currently preserved. Either it's owned by the city or the city has what's called an easement on it to protect the open space as part of our habitat plan. There is still pressure that happens within the unincorporated area within San Diego County, often in the backcountry areas that are typically outside of the city's boundaries. But the hope is by providing more